The one that started it all, Age of Empires II HD released over 10 years after the original and brought AoE into the digital age, delivering updated graphics, support for widescreen and high-resolution monitors, and Steam multiplayer and workshop support, a massive upgrade that gave Age of Empires the shot in the arm it needed to stay relevant in the digital era. AoE 2 was obviously an insanely good game already, arguably perfect in many ways, so the HD edition didn't seek to change anything up, which actually led to some criticism at the time, with some arguing that it should have gone further. Regardless, over time it received universal love, and its success is probably why AoE has been doing so well in the past 5 years or so. While it was a very competent remaster, H2 HD, as mentioned, it didn't change up the formula really at all, and we're judging these games on their re-releases, not the original ones, so I'm going to be ranking it a B. A solid technical uplift, and it did lead to further expansions down the line, but with no real changes to the base game, its success had much more to do with the fact that it was expanding the audience and bringing the game into a new technical age rather than improving it. I'm actually working on a big video in the background right now where I'm going to be reviewing and ranking every Age of Empires game, DLC and expansion ever made, so if that sounds like a good time to you, then subscribe and keep an eye out. Following in the steps of Age 2, Stronghold HD brought the original game to Steam with a few important updates and fixes, mostly in the technical department. It was running rough on older hardware and it was becoming difficult to acquire in this modern gaming landscape of ours, so the Steam release was a great way for Firefly Studios to start bringing in some income from their back catalogue, and you can learn more about that in my documentary that I just did if you're interested. It added support for large, high-resolution monitors and compatibility for modern operating systems, though it didn't include Steam multiplayer support and instead relied on an included copy of Game Ranger for PvP, which was kind of rough. Unlike Age 2, this didn't lead to any new content or expansions down the line, but like Age 2, it brought a beloved game to the masses and it made it much easier to play on modern systems. Not including Steamworks integration is rough though, so because of that, Stronghold HD is getting a C. Now, Crusader HD, same deal as before really, technical compatibility, modern system support, etc. And no Steam multiplayer, and a game all about skirmish? Youch. C. Following Age 2, Microsoft's next target was Age of Mythology, which came in the form of Age of Mythology Extended Edition. It included mostly the same suite of upgrades that its predecessor did, such as full Steam Workshop integration, but also came with more of a focus on graphical updates and even a few new features, like a day-night cycle, direct Twitch streaming integration, and more. It even got some new post-release content in the form of Tales of the Dragon, but unlike the expansions for Age 2 HD, this one was universally panned, and by most accounts, is not worth the bits it's printed on. Regardless, it was a solid release, and thanks to its feature set, it gets a B as well. Big thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring this video, the world's most comprehensive vehicle combat game available for free on PC, console, and mobile. With hundreds of planes, tanks, and ships from the past 100 years of human history, no doubt there'll be something here that catches your eye and causes you to go down a 16-hour Wikipedia rabbit hole, where you find out that after we cancelled our F-16 deal, New Zealand was offered a lease from Sukhoi for an unspecified number of Su-30s. What the f***? War Thunder puts you in the pilot seat, with realistic graphics and sound for an immersive vehicle combat experience you can't get anywhere else. Featuring an extensive damage model with tons of weapons and ammo types, and an X-ray view to see exactly why you or your enemy detonated into a million pieces, War Thunder's sophisticated combat sandbox is something to behold. Join a player base of over 70 million people from around the world as you battle it out in land, air, and sea in modes ranging from arcade to simulator. And I think my favourite part about all this is that anyone can play with the peripherals they've got, so it's a controller or a mouse and keyboard. There's no need for a full HOTAS setup, unless you have one and really want to rock it, of course, in which case, go for it. It's available for free on PC, consoles and mobile, so use my link in the description or pinned comment to get a massive bonus pack on PC or console if you're a new player or haven't logged in over 6 months, including multiple premium vehicles, an exclusive Eagle of Valor Decorator, 100k of Silver Lions, and a week of premium account access. This is available for a limited time, so if you're interested, don't wait. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video and supporting the channel. The Homeworld Remastered Collection brought the original 2 Homeworld games into the modern era with an enormous technical uplift, covering compatibility, graphics, and usability. At the time, I would go as far as to say that this was the most striking RTS remaster we'd probably ever seen. Not quite so much for Homeworld 2, but definitely for Homeworld 1. which was nigh unplayable at the time, thanks to its general unavailability and lack of modern conveniences and hardware support. It wasn't as great as it seemed though, because as it turned out, Homeworld 1 hadn't actually been remastered in the way everyone thought it had. Homeworld 2 had been, yes, but Homeworld 1 had been essentially remade inside the Homeworld 2 engine, which made sense from a technical perspective, but it also meant that a lot of the nuances that made that game unique had now been lost, such as how formations worked, not having fuel as a resource for fightercraft, and the lack of a true ballistic system. The whole package was also pretty buggy on release, which didn't help its case. The general consensus was that if you were after a remaster of Homeworld 2, you'd be well served, but a remaster of the original? Not so much. If you weren't as much of a Homeworld diehard though, being able to experience the fantastic campaign of the original without having to jump through the hoops you did before was awesome, especially if you didn't know what you were missing. This is kind of a tough run to rank, obviously it had some issues, but multiplayer was fantastic as it included all the races from both games into one mode. The graphics were genuinely gorgeous, and they still hold up today, and it made them easy to access and play on modern hardware. Plus it included versions of the original games in the package if you wanted to experience them as they were on release. Knowing what I know now, I'm guessing it was technical limitations and realities that led to the decision to use Homeworld 2's engine rather than modernizing the original, but I can't say for sure. I think I have to give this one a B just because of all the good it did, but just know it's teetering on a C because of how Homeworld 1 was handled. Halo Wars Definitive Edition was a game that I kind of forgot existed, mostly because of how inconsequential it was. That is if you don't count that this is how the game was released on PC, as the original only came out on Xbox 360. Then I guess it is pretty consequential. Anyway, this was more of a port of the original game and its DLC to PC and Xbox One. Though to its credit, it did include a few more things like some slight visual improvements and integration with Steam. Something to remember though is that this was released in Microsoft's dumbass era. Well, actually that one might be still going. Well, okay, one of their dumbass eras. And this game does not support crossplay. And not just the crossplay you're thinking between Xbox and PC. No, it doesn't even have crossplay between PC and PC. Because if you bought this on the Windows Store, God bless you, you couldn't play it with someone who bought it on Steam. Bruh. So yeah, quite the weak remaster. D. Good game though. Stronghold Legends Steam Edition was the next cab off the rank for Firefly in terms of bringing their older catalogue to modern platforms. Sitting somewhere in between the HD and Definitive Edition games, though definitely leaning more towards the former, Legends Steam Edition brought all the game's DLC into a single package alongside some new maps, technical compatibility, and, yes, full Steam integration with workshop, achievements, multiplayer, and cards! Yes! High C for this, I reckon, maybe a B on a good day, or if you were biased. The first of the larger scale RTS re-releases that we're so used to now, Age of Empires Definitive Edition was kind of an interesting game. In a way, it was authentic to a fault, as it retained a lot of the annoyances from the original game in order to stay true to its heritage, like bland campaigns and some truly awful pathfinding. But in other aspects, AoE DE was truly great, executing an impeccable graphical overhaul and making a game that was extremely difficult to play nowadays infinitely more accessible to a modern audience. While it took a couple of years to come to Steam, it did eventually make it just before its sequel would blow everything else out of the water. I have a lot of personal bias here towards Age 1, as it was the first RTS that I really remember putting a lot of time into as a kid, but it really is a product of its time, and the Definitive Edition was a little afraid to truly bring it into the modern era, with certain improvements like the pathfinding that I think if fixed would have made for a better game overall, and I don't think many people would be complaining that it wasn't true to the original. Still, as I said, the visuals were insanely good, the modernised soundtrack was a total banger, and something about this level of an upgrade to the original Age of Empires just kind of put a smile on my face. I remember playing this like the second it came out in an airport of all places, and being completely enamoured with what I was seeing. I apologise, but I cannot give it anything but an A. It's probably a B, but I'm biased, so A it is. Starcraft Remastered, remember this one? For whatever reason, this completely slipped my mind, but regardless, it's a damn good remaster, and it's kinda crazy considering how badly Blizzard's other big name RTS remaster flopped a few years after. The team behind it smartly decided that keeping the gameplay as is would be the right move for StarCraft, and so the remaster instead focused on technical compatibility and a visual overhaul that kept the spirit of the original while looking much better. It even does that cool thing where you can swap between old and new styles with a tap of a button, and I understand why this is a technical impossibility in most remasters, but damn do I wish this was in all of them. Unfortunately, it was and still is only available on Battle.net, so no Steam, but considering the visual and audio uplift, inclusion of its expansion, and how much it plays like the original, that is to say exactly the same, Starcraft Remastered is arguably a perfect remake, depending on your perspective, and for those reasons, I think it's our first S-tier game. Like Stronghold Legends, Stronghold 2 Steam Edition brought added new features in the form of Steam integration and a slight visual uplift, among a few other things. There's not much more to say here, as we've covered it previously. Long story short, it improved on what was an already pretty good game and made it available to a wider audience at an affordable price. But it didn't bring anything substantial or lead to any new content or anything, so C tier. Holy moly. Alright, now we're talking Age 2 Definitive Edition, probably the undisputed king of RTS remasters, and for good reason. Number 1, gameplay. It took a basically perfect RTS game and somehow made it better, with updated quality of life, new content on launch and post-release, and expanded mechanics with new modes and factions. 2, visuals. I'm not sure exactly how they did it, but the development team managed to perfectly retain the soul of the original while updating it to modern standards. It looks absolutely gorgeous. 3. Technical state and availability. Age 2 DE runs great, even on lower end systems. It's perfectly compatible with basically any piece of hardware out there, and it even released on Xbox with full dedicated controller support and UI. And it just came out on PS5 too. And because of these console releases, it widened the audience massively, bringing in all players from all platforms with full crossplay. It's no wonder that Age 2 DE has had the life it's had, and with new expansions releasing basically every year, it's showing no signs of slowing down. Easy top S tier. Age 3 Definitive Edition followed in its predecessor's footsteps and delivered a fantastic re-envisioning of an already great RTS game. However, this wasn't quite the slam dunk its predecessor was. While it did fix some existing issues with Age of Empires 3, namely the kind of unbalanced home city card system where new players would be at a significant disadvantage versus experienced ones, it launched in quite a buggy and unoptimized state, and it had a few balance problems to say the least. It definitely shored up over time, and now it's pretty damn solid, especially with the addition of a completely free-to-play version that includes a rotating roster of factions for multiplayer, and a taste of the single-player offering. Plus, it's had quite a few dedicated expansions, which you love to see, and the visual and audio improvements are still great, regardless of how unstable the game was at launch. If I was ranking this as a launch day product, it honestly probably gets a D, maybe a C, but now though I think it deserves a high B on account for its content offering and accessibility with the quite generous free-to-play model. Like Starcraft Remastered, the Command & Conquer Remastered Collection didn't aim to rock the boat in terms of gameplay or content. It instead aimed to transplant an ancient game, 2 in this case, into the modern day with a feature set and technical compatibility befitting of the 2020s. It improved the graphics significantly in terms of clarity, while still remaining decidedly lo-fi, and most importantly made the game easily playable on any modern hardware, which was basically just straight up not a thing before this for Tiberian Dawn and Red Alert. Considering what Petroglyph had set out to achieve with C&C Remastered, it was an absolute slam dunk. The improved UI, technical support, and online features alone made it a win, but the inclusion of both games' expansion packs, plus the console port-only content from back in the day, and both remastered and new music, made it an easy W for EA. Oh, they also released the original source code for both games just before release, which made modding using the in-game loading system much easier for the community. C&C Remastered joins Age 2 Definitive and Starcraft Remastered in S tier. While I and others I'm sure would have liked to see more content or the inclusion of other C&C games, in terms of execution, this is an essentially flawless, perfect remaster. Plus, if you watched my recent documentary on Stronghold, you'll know that the existence of this game indirectly led to both Stronghold and Stronghold Crusader Definitive Editions, so I gotta give it props for that. Link in the description, by the way. Easily the worst remaster we've ever seen for an RTS game, maybe any game, honestly. The story of Warcraft III Reforged is a litany of lies, broken promises, and disappointment. While it's seen some updates over the past 5 years and is definitely in a better spot now than it was on release, the issues with the game are ingrained so deeply that I don't think anything could fix the reputation it's garnered. While I won't run through the story of the game's downfall in its entirety, as that's been covered many times in many places before, to cut a long story short, Blizzard had promised sweeping improvements to the game's cinematic presentation and technical feature set, but thanks to poor management, staff layoffs, and general Activision Blizzard nonsense, the budget and time frame required to complete the project ended up being way undercooked, causing the final game to underdeliver on nearly all fronts. The visuals were underwhelming, the multiplayer and other technical feature upgrades were negligible or even made worse in some cases, the cinematics were nowhere near what was promised, and there were things like a dramatically more restrictive EULA and practically the removal of the old version of the game, replaced with this new release with essentially a classic skin over top. People were not stoked about Reforged, to say the least, and I think it's fair to say that this was one of the torpedoes that sank the Blizzard ship. Alongside the do you guys not have phones, everything to do with Overwatch 2, the Blitzchung incident, and all the depraved stuff that went on inside Blizzard offices. I'd highly recommend reading Jason Schreier's book for an extremely interesting deep dive into Blizzard's history, if you're wanting to know more about the goings-on behind the closed doors and how their games actually got made, the good ones and the bad. Warcraft III Reforged gets a big fat F. An awful situation all around, and one that hasn't improved dramatically since release. It's better, sure, but it's still a far cry from what was promised all those years ago. And all you need to do is just mention Warcraft III Reforged, and people get angry, for good reason. Stronghold Definitive Edition did what the 10-year-old Stronghold HD couldn't, and properly remade the game for modern audiences in the same vein as Age 2 Definitive a few years earlier. While the visual uplift wasn't as striking as some may have been expecting, I'm glad they went the way they did considering how iconic Stronghold's visual style is. But that's not to say it doesn't look better, it definitely does, and playing it at 4K resolution on a big monitor looks awesome. It scales perfectly, and it has a UI that's actually usable. Nice. It also came with the requisite remastered audio, UI improvements, full Steam integration, there we go, with multiplayer support, and in some ways even went further than most other RTS remasters in the fact that it included new content on launch and post-release in the form of 2 DLC packs. The only thing it didn't bring, which I think most people expected, was a skirmish mode, which if you watch my documentary, you'll learn why that was. But still, despite all the technical hurdles it would have taken to achieve, it was a shame to not see it included. And for that, I gotta give Stronghold DE a B. Nearly an A, but not quite. Talk about being a good time for RTS players, the first half of the 2020s has seen some absolute bangers, and that continued with 2024's Age of Mythology Retold, a full rebuild of Age of Mythology with a simultaneous launch on PC and console. Alongside its massive visual overhaul, the soundtrack also received a do-over, as did the UI, and a number of options available to customize the game to your heart's content. Funnily enough, this release actually included less content than was available in the extended edition, as it didn't come with the maligned Tales of the Dragon DLC. It seems Microsoft were happy to let people forget that ever existed, and fair enough, I suppose. Retold did get its own Chinese-centered DLC post-launch, however, and this one received a much warmer reception than its predecessor. I had this positioned as A tier when I was mapping this video out, but as I'm writing it now, I think I have to give it an S. I just don't think there's anything they really could have changed or done better. Some people had some AI issues, but is that worth dropping it down to an A? I don't know, man. I don't think so, but let me know in the comments what you think. For now, it sits in S tier. The Warcraft Remaster Battle Chest is one that slipped under the radar for most people, I think, me included. It released earlier this year and included remastered versions of Warcraft 1 and 2, plus the expansions, as well as an updated version of Warcraft III Reforged, but we've discussed that one already. Gameplay-wise, the Battle Chest is mostly as you'd expect, a mostly unchanged, if slightly improved version of the original. A lot of people, me included, aren't stoked with this visual style. I mean, I think it just looks kind of bad, like cheap even. Almost like cartoony in its design, but not in a fun way. Like, and this part's important, the optional skin for Starcraft Remastered. This one doesn't seem to keep the soul of the original. It instead just feels like a total reimagining of what the game could look like. Looks like a mobile game, not in a good way. I also don't love how they're bundled in one product, plus they're only available on Battle.net, so no user reviews to inform potential players. I think Warcraft Remastered Battle Chest deserves a D tier. Honestly, it's a weak remaster, but not overly offensive or unfriendly towards consumers. Personally, I'd put it below Halo Wars, but it's still a lot better than Warcraft III Reforged, even though that's included in the Battle Chest, but I'm mostly counting Warcraft 1 and 2 here. Yeah, D tier, sucks to suck. Stronghold Crusader Definitive Edition is the most recent game we're talking about today. It actually just released like 1 week ago. Like Stronghold DE, Crusader DE brought an effective but not incredibly striking visual overhaul, a modern UI system, technological improvements, and full Steam integration to the table, and it seems to have landed pretty darn well. You can watch my review if you're interested in hearing more about it, but long story short, it's a great remaster, made unique by the fact that it includes a ton of new content to go alongside what was already a great offering from the original. It includes new AI lords, multiple new campaigns, new game modes, and new units, which for Stronghold is a big deal, as each unit is a new, unique way to approach wiping your enemy's castles off the map. As our last game today, I think Crusader DE has to be in S tier. It's technically fantastic, supports basically any hardware new enough to connect to the internet, and has a truly massive swath of content to enjoy, no matter if you prefer single or multiplayer. Enjoy your crown, Kings. S tier. Lastly, I do want to quickly shout out Dawn of War Definitive Edition, as it's around a month away from release at this point, and fingers crossed it's going to be a slam dunk, barring any technical issues or launch day catastrophes. It promises an improved 64-bit engine for better mod support, visual upgrades, Steam integration, etc, and it does look pretty enticing, but we of course won't know how good it is truly until it releases. So if you're watching this video in the future, when it has indeed come out, then you might be able to watch my review on the game, or just let me know in the comments where you think it should be placed. For now, it goes into the secret tier U for unreleased. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring the video. If you're interested in checking out the game, then you can do so for free on PC, console, and mobile. And if you use my link in the description or pinned comment and are a new player or haven't logged in over 6 months, you'll get the bonus pack for PC and console, including premium vehicles, silver lions, and premium account access. Thank you so much for watching, subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.